Performance and discharge of contracts. Introduction. Under the Indian Contract Act, 1872, a contract is formed when parties make a lawful agreement. Once a contract is formed, the parties are legally bound to perform their obligations. When these obligations are completed or legally terminated, the contract is said to be discharged. The topics of performance and discharge of contracts explain how contractual obligations are fulfilled and how contracts come to an end. Performance of contract. Meaning of performance. Performance of a contract means fulfilling the duties and promises made by the parties according to the terms of the contract. When both parties perform their obligations, the contract is completely performed. Performance of a contract means the fulfillment of the promises made by the parties to the contract according to its terms. Under the Indian Contract Act, 1872, once a valid contract is formed, both parties are legally bound to perform their respective obligations. When the promissor carries out his promise and the promisee accepts it, the contract is said to be performed. Performance may be actual, where the parties actually do what they promised, or attempted, where a party offers to perform but the other party refuses to accept it. In such cases, the party offering performance is not liable for non-performance. Performance must be done by the promissor himself, his agent, or legal representative, unless the contract requires personal skill. The performance should take place at the agreed time and place or within a reasonable time if no time is fixed. Thus, performance of contract is the normal and natural way by which contractual obligations are fulfilled and the contract comes to an end. Types of performance. There are mainly two types of performance of a contract. The first is actual performance, where both parties to the contract fulfill their promises exactly according to the agreed terms. Once actual performance is completed, the contract is fully discharged and no further obligations remain. The second is attempted performance, also known as tender of performance, where one party offers to perform his promise properly but the other party refuses to accept it. Actual performance. Actual performance occurs when both parties actually fulfill their promises as agreed. Actual performance means the real and complete fulfillment of the promises made by both parties to a contract. When each party performs his obligation exactly according to the terms of the contract is said to be actually performed. After actual performance, the rights and duties of the parties come to an end and the contract is fully discharged. For example, if A agrees to sell goods to B and A delivers the goods while B pays the agreed price, both parties have actually performed their promises. Thus, actual performance is the normal and best way of performing a contract. Attempted performance, tender of performance. Attempted performance occurs when a party offers to perform its obligation, but the other party refuses to accept it. Such an offer must be valid. Attempted performance, also known as tender of performance, occurs when one party offers to perform his promise according to the terms of the contract, but the other party refuses to accept the performance. In such a case, the party making the offer is not responsible for non-performance, as he has shown readiness and willingness to perform his obligation. For a tender to be valid, it must be unconditional, made at the proper time and place, and in accordance with the terms of the contract. For example, if A offers to deliver goods to B on the agreed date and place, but B refuses to accept them, A is said to have made an attempted performance. Thus, tender of performance protects a willing party from liability when the other party refuses to accept performance. The performance of a contract can generally be demanded by the promisee, any legal representative, a third party. The promisee is the person to whom the promise is made, and he has the primary right to demand performance of the contract. Since the contract is made for his benefit, the promissor is legally bound to perform the promise in favor of the promisee. If the promissor fails to perform, the promisee can take legal action for breach of contract. Therefore, the promisee is the main person entitled to demand performance under the Indian Contract Act, 1872. Any legal representative of the promisee, in case of the death of the promisee, the legal representative of the promisee can demand performance of the contract. The legal representative steps into the place of the promisee and can enforce the contract on his behalf. However, this rule applies only when the contract does not involve personal skill, personal qualifications, or personal confidence. If the contract is of a personal nature, it comes to an end on the death of the promisee. Thus, a legal representative can demand performance only in contracts that are not personal in nature. A third party, if the contract provides for it. In general, only the parties to a contract can demand performance. However, a third party can demand performance if the contract expressly provides for it. This usually happens when the contract is made for the benefit of a third person, such as in the case of a trust, family arrangement, or charge created in favor of a third party. In such cases, the third party gets a legal right to enforce the contract even though he is not a direct party to it. Thus, when the terms of the contract allow it, a third party can demand performance.